Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of Sefer Mishlei, the book of Proverbs. We are about to read together and study together the second half of chapter 21. We're about to start from verse 16. The verse goes as follows: Adam to'eh miderech haskel, a person who strays from the proper path. Haskel could mean the intelligent, smart path, the appropriate path. Or Haskel, as I translated earlier, could also mean the successful path. B'kahal refa'im yanuach, he shall rest. In other words, he shall meet his end, his final end, in the company of the group of Rifa'im, which is usually translated as ghouls or ghosts or something like that. So Rashi and many of the classic commentaries understand this to mean he will end up in hell, basically. It's another way of saying that. Certainly a straightforward reading. The Metzudos has a little different twist on this, and that is that an Adam Toa, a person that strays from the proper path, from the good and successful path, he'll always have, his life will constantly be a mess. It'll constantly be full of trouble. It's never going to take a straight, successful path. He's always going to be straying off in one direction or another, always having anxieties and troubles, and he will not rest until he ends up in the land of ghosts. He will not find rest and peace until he ends up in death. That would be another way of reading this verse. Verse 17, Ish machsor ohev simcha, a person who loves, an ohev simcha, one who loves happiness, one who always loves to party, is a person who is always going to be poor. He's always going to miss things. He's going to waste all of his resources on temporary pleasures. This is more really economic advice. Ohev yayin v'shemen, if you love wine and oil too much, lo ya'ashir, you will never get rich. This is advice to also, economic advice. If you drink too much, you're never going to save your money. You're never going to save your wealth. You're always going to be impoverished. Kofer latzadik rasha, the evil person, is a kofer, which is generally means a form of, often translated as a ransom, where you redeem one person's life by paying for it, or sometimes by switching it out for another life. So, like, let's say somebody captures a hostage and says to the people from whom the hostage was captured, and say, "We'll give the hostage back if you hand over so and so," a certain person that they want to harm for whatever reason. So this is simply understood as when suffering comes upon the world, sometimes the when God wants to visit punishment onto some people, the rasha, the evil person, will often end up being the one who suffers, while the innocent person goes free. Now, if we understand this in more of a legal sense, as tzaddik and rasha, as the tzaddik meaning the one who is innocent, and rasha the one who is guilty, this means that sometimes you can falsely accuse someone, but eventually that person, that tzaddik, might suffer. But eventually, when the rasha is found, when the guilty one is found, then he will become a ransom, and he will redeem the tzaddik, the righteous one who never should have been punished in the first place. V'tachas yishorim boged, and the boged, a person who rebels, he will end up suffering instead of the person who was just and right. So often in the beginning of a process, the innocent get blamed, but eventually it becomes obvious who the rebel was, and the blame comes off of the innocent one. Verse 19 is a very similar to verse 9, where we said it's better to be alone and live in the corner of somebody's roof rather than be in a beautiful house with a spouse or a partner who is very difficult and makes life challenging. Tov Sheves B'Eretz Midbar. This is almost the same phrase, except it is better to live in a desolate land in the middle of the woods, in the middle of the wilderness, Me'eshes Midyanim Bokas, if you're going to be stuck with, rather than be with a woman who is causing trouble and anger and is always angry and screaming and yelling in the house. It's better just to be outside on your own than be in the house with someone like that. Verse 20, Otsar Nechmad v'shemen b'nevei chacham, in the house, in the property, in the estate of the chacham, of a wise man, he has storehouses that are beautiful, within which are stored oil. Oil is a way of storing wealth in those days. It's a very valuable commodity. In other words, a smart person will save. He will keep things. He's not going to use them and spend them. He will put money aside. Uksil adam yival enu, but a foolish man will swallow it up. He'll use up all of his oil. He will not have any wealth stored away for later, for when he may need it, and not, unfortunately, not have it. Verse 21, Rodev tzedakah v'chesed, someone who chases righteousness and kindness, yimtza chayim, he will find life. Tzedakah, he will find righteousness, v'chavod, and he will find honor. Such a person, if he looks for that, he will find it. Ir giborim ola chacham, a city of powerful people, of mighty warriors. A smart man was able to best them, to beat them. In other words, sometimes being the strongest and mightiest and having the fanciest weapons is not as important as someone who does it with wisdom and intelligence. Wisdom and intelligence will eventually win. If Yored Oz Mivtecha, he, the smart one, will be able to bring down the strength of all those mighty fortifications. Shomer Pivul Shono, Shomer Mitzaros Nafsho. Someone who watches his mouth and his tongue, he's careful about what he says. Such a person will be saving himself from all sorts of problems, from all sorts of suffering. Keeps himself out of trouble by watching what he says. Very important lesson, something that's been repeated over and over and over again throughout the book of Proverbs, the importance of being careful what you say. Zaid Yehir Leitz Shemo. A Zaid is a obnoxious person, but more of just a evil person, a person who pushes himself violently upon others. Leitz Shemo. He is also called a cynic. He is a Leitz. A Leitz is someone who doesn't take things seriously. So that is a Zaid, a violent, bad person, is almost always also a cynic who doesn't take anything seriously, certainly not other people's feelings and other people's property and other people's lives. Oseb Evra Zadon. And when he does things, he does it in a wrath of vicious anger, and so he doesn't think before he does. He doesn't care about anything else. So he gets mad and he just does things. Tavas otzel timisenu, the desire of the lazy person. The verses 25 and 26 are really one long sentence. I'm going to read them that way. The desire, the atzel, the lazy man, has so many things that he wants, it's going to end up killing him. Why? Because he's too lazy to do the work necessary to make it be successful. He wants to be successful, and he desires all these things, but he's lazy, so he's not willing to put in the work to make it happen properly. Kol hayom hisavet tavo. All day long, he's desiring things, and that's all he can think about is what he wants. Vitzadik, but a righteous person, yitain, literally yitain means he will give, but over here, in this context, it means he will give effort. He will work. V'lo yachsoch, he will not hold back. He will not be cheap on his labor. A tzaddik will do the work necessary in order to achieve the goal, whereas the atzel will always want the goal, but never put in the work. That is 25 and 26. Verse 27, Zevach Rishoim Toeva, The sacrifice that is brought by a rasha, by an evil person, is an abomination to God. We've had this thought several times. God is not interested in your sacrifices if your behavior is not appropriate. Afki vizima yivianu, especially if he brings it with disgusting background. In other words, he brings it because of prophets that he brings a sacrifice because of prophets that he made in dirty, dishonest ways. Aid kisavim yoved, a witness who constantly lies will eventually be destroyed. At some point, his lies will be caught, and he's going to be destroyed. But a kind of person who listens, the type of person who listens carefully, he doesn't keep talking and talking and talking and lying, even though he doesn't know what he's talking about, but he listens. That person, Lanetzach, when he speaks, he will speak things of eternal truth, things that are important, things that are Lanetzach, things that last forever. Those are the kinds of words that he will say because he's the kind of person that listens. So an Eid Kizavim, a person that's constantly lying, he never bothers to stop and listen. He never learns. So the more he talks, the more nonsense he's going to say. Verse 29, He'ez ish rasha b'fanav. V'yashar hu yavin darko. An ish rasha, right? An evil person is He'ez b'fanav. He is arrogant in his face. He has arrogance. And he's the one who always gets up and talks. He's constantly saying what he thinks. This is an evil person where he's constantly saying what he thinks because he's so arrogant that he doesn't think about what he says, like we just said in the last verse. He's constantly babbling. But v'yashar, but a straight person is a kind of person who can understand his way. He sees right through it. He sees right through the arrogance. The arrogant person can talk and talk and talk, and think that people listen to him, and think that people understand what he's saying, and thinks that whatever he says, people will believe just because he says them. Whereas a Yashar could see right through the nonsense, and he sees right through the lies. Verse 30, Ein Chachma v'ein Tvuna. There is no wisdom, there is no understanding, v'ein Eitzah, and there is no counsel, there is no way around it, l'neged Adonai, when you're trying to act against God. So, in other words, even though I said before, a few verses ago, what verse was that? I think that was, in 22, that when it comes to human conflict, wisdom is always going to win over, no matter how powerful the enemy is. But wisdom cannot prevail against God's plans. If something was supposed to happen in a certain way because God deemed it that way, no matter how smart you are, you can't beat the laws of nature. You can't beat the laws of how the world works that the Creator made, and the laws that he set into place and the way the world works. You can't beat that no matter how smart you think you are. Verse 31 is, in the Masoretic text, is really the first verse of the next chapter. It's really the first verse of chapter 22. So I'm going to read that in 22. So I'm going to conclude chapter 21 here, and we'll start chapter 22 in the next podcast with the last verse in 21, which we'll read in the next podcast. Thank you so much for studying chapter 21 together with me. I really appreciate everyone who participates. If you would like to send comments, feel free to comment in any of the public forums, or you can send me an email directly at weinrebsaul, that is WEINREBSAUL @gmail.com. I wish everyone a wonderful, wonderful day.